I I don't know what to say about this one. I just don't. I watched this movie a few days ago, and I'm still struggling to accept what I watched. Laser Team 1 wasn't an amazing film by any means, but it was fun enough, and on subsequent rewatches, its enjoyment factor still holds up. Laser Team 1 was an idea. Laser Team 2 was an afterthought. The fact that it even got a sequel is actually kind of surprising considering the first movie was technically a commercial flop. Like, it did not make its money back in its theatrical run. It underperformed pretty badly. I think I realized the sequel was in trouble because there was no fanfare surrounding it. With Laser Team 1, there was so much buzz and hype, and everyone was excited, and there was the Kickstarter, and they were taking it to film festivals and everything. Here, it was just nothing. It was mentioned there was a sequel, they filmed it very fast, then there was a trailer, but other than that, no one was hyped, there wasn't a lot of internet buzz, and if there was a theatrical release, it never came to Massachusetts because despite how hard I tried, I could not find tickets. This movie was basically left in YouTube Red to die with as little word as possible, which begs the question, why did they even bother? Probably because the end of Laser Team 1 directly stated that there would be a sequel, but therein lies the first problem on our list. At the end of the first film, the Laser Team had won over the Antarians, but the alien race was not defeated, and as a result, the plan was to take the fight to them and send Laser Team to space. Now, on paper, that sounds like a good place to pick up the sequel, right? Sounds logical enough? Well, apparently not, because they just completely dropped that in the opening credits sequence by telling us that the mission was scrapped due to the team not being able to function as a team, even though they just spent an entire movie learning to function as a team. And now the members are doing various odd jobs, and DT is in danger of getting shut down due to lack of funding, which, given that they just saved the entire planet, you'd think government sponsors would be lining up to pad their wallet, but I guess not. The first half hour of this movie, which isn't even a full hour and a half with credits, is just spent getting the team back together, minus Woody because he's captured in Tentacle Rape Land, or as we like to call it, Japan, to go on this mission. Over a third of the movie is spent just preparing to go out. Now, that wouldn't be a problem if they just picked up with them training to go to space, but this way feels like an incredibly padded out where are they now, which shouldn't be the case. Like, for starters, the timeline's a bit confusing. At one point they say it's been a few months, at another point they say it's been 4 years, but regardless of how long it's been, Herman's boot still hasn't been repaired from the end of the first movie for no discernible reason. Woody said at the end of the first film that it was likely he could repair it with upgrades. Why didn't that happen? Why does he still have a dysfunctional boot? Also, Zach's laser cannon now doesn't have enough juice to fully operate? How? Why? Hell if I know. The only thing I can think of is that the super laser at the end of the first movie completely wiped out his mojo. But why didn't it mess up the shield or the helmet? They still function fine, and need I remind you, all 4 of the parts had to be in sync in order to make that attack work. But you know something? Upon reflection, it is actually a miracle these things are working at all, considering Woody spends the majority of the film with the helmet off his head. And as we established, all 4 pieces have to be worn in order for them to work. Now, I know they're kind of malfunctioning a bit in this one, but they shouldn't be working at all if one of the pieces is not being worn. So that's a massive plot hole right there. I also feel I should point out that despite the fact that their project was discontinued due to the fact that they were unable to work together, these guys get along a lot better now than they did in the first movie. There's no real sense of bitterness here, more like a group of guys that haven't hung out in a while and are just catching up. Anyway, the plot is kicked off by newcomer Maggie, played by Nichole Bloom, who somehow got roped into this movie, presumably by her working with Colton Dunn on an NBC show and not by being kidnapped. Now, to her credit, she does a pretty good job, and for the majority of the movie she's a delight to have on screen, but I have a real problem with her character, because the entire reason for them not getting off that ship with their lives once they're all reunited is not because she wants to save the world, but because she likes smart Woody and wants to get the helmet back so that she doesn't have to put up with stupid Woody. It's for an entirely superficial reason, which I suppose would make for a character trait to balance her out that I could appreciate were it not for the fact that it was going to get everyone killed. For a scientist to be led along not by logic but by superficiality seems a bit hard to swallow for me. Another thing, and this is a reiteration of an earlier point, if they were just going to use the Antarians as the main villains again anyway, why do we bother with the time skip thing? Because at the end of the first movie, they were coming full speed to Earth to get revenge for having their games destroyed. But I guess they took a few month to 4-year detour because instead of coming straight to Earth, they decided to blow up a bunch of other planets so that more champions would rise up and beat them. They're such sore losers that they would prefer to blow up an entire galaxy's worth of planets in order to ensure they'd never lose their games again after losing just one match, rather than just take out their aggression on Earth with every weapon in their arsenal. The motivation of the villains is the equivalent of a toddler throwing a temper tantrum and not even aiming it at the offending parties. Adding on to that, did anyone else get some weird Hunger Games vibes from this? Like, the first movie was about competing in a twisted kill-or-be-destroyed sporting event, and now the sequel is about going back into the ring while the people running it are trying to kill off anyone that might pose a threat to them. I'm half expecting the third movie, if there is one, to be about open galactic warfare. By far, the worst part of this movie is Major Kilbourne, the new head of DDA, who spends more of her time trying to dismantle it than run it, which, given the government as it is today, doesn't seem all that unlikely. Now, for the majority of the film, the general impression of her is that she's a raging massive bitch with no other defining personality or characteristic about her, which given RT's history with writing women really isn't that much of a surprise, but here's where a whole lot of bullshit happens. It turns out that DDA was actually training 2 champions of Earth, and that Kilbourne is the sister of Adam from the first movie, was jealous that she was passed over in favor for him, and is now working with the Ontarians to destroy Earth as some sort of act of petty revenge. Okay. Many problems with this. It was stated throughout the first movie that Adam had been humanity's last hope against the alien conflict. If there was a backup plan in place, then he wasn't the last hope. They did not have a backup plan in place. The entire first movie happened because there was no backup plan in place. Now, a character having a secret relative that comes to light in the sequel is not a new idea by any means, but when the identity of it completely dismantles everything you set up in the first film in some sort of cheap but actually kind of way, it doesn't work. And what is it with women in RT lore with these petty jealous revenge things? That was South's big thing in RVB, and if you believe the book CT as well, but screw you if I'm going to acknowledge the book. Especially since Kilbourne is so one-dimensionally over-the-top ridiculous that it's impossible to either take her seriously or feel any sort of sympathy that she got passed over for her brother. Which probably makes her getting taken out by a fucking snail of all things so fitting, and if you somehow didn't get that reference, honestly you're probably better off. And as for the Space Invader scene, guys, it didn't work in Pixels, it's not going to work here. Look, I don't want to have this be an entirely bad note. The best thing I can say about it is that from a visual standpoint, it at least looks okay. The CGI, while still nothing to write home about, seems a little more polished in this film than the last one. The views we get of space are fucking gorgeous, and the one major action scene we get of the team with their upgrading equipment is actually really goddamn fun. It's probably the one single bright spot in this otherwise dumb movie. But as a movie, it's just a terribly written piece of schlock trying to capitalize off the hype of the first film with no work put into making it a good story. This movie exists to almost entirely erase the achievements of the first film with how much of that movie got retconned in this film. And on top of all that, the actors are really not into this movie at all. Michael Jones, who can usually breathe energy into anything he touches, is so lifeless to look at and listen to that you'd think they brought him back from the fucking dead just to do this movie. Burnie Burns seems tired through the whole thing. Gavin Free does the opening intro bit sounding as though someone is holding a gun to the back of his head. And Colton Dunn looks like he'd rather be anywhere but here. Nichole Bloom and Kirk Johnson are the only 2 actors really trying to give any sort of worthwhile performance, and they absolutely cannot save this movie no matter how hard they try or how many stupid faces Johnson makes. I probably shouldn't have expected anything substantial when I saw that Chris Damaris and Josh Flanagan were not attached to the writing staff of this film, but I didn't realize how quickly this would fall apart without them. At this point, I'm convinced that Damaris and Flanagan are the only worthwhile writers left over at Rooster Teeth. Daniel Fabeo is an editor and a documentary director, so why he's attached to this project as a writer is utterly beyond me. And if there's a weak link here, I'm guessing it was him. I really would love to know what the thought process was for this movie, because with how much love and time and passion they poured into the first film, you'd think that would have carried over. But like with Ruby, there's no soul to this. It's just nothing. So yeah, Lazer Team 2 is a terrible movie and not worth your time. That's all I can really say about it. In response to the mid-credits stinger scene...
No! None of that! Shame on you!
God, TFS Bardox gives me so much good material. Oh, and the Antarian's laser? It's a shaft with testicles. And now that I've pointed it out, you can never unsee it.